Hello, everybody. It's Caley Fretz. I'm here with a special episode today, something a bit different from us. We just released our annual transparency report. Actually, we did 2 in the last year. And just completed a live Discord Q&A with a bunch of our members and wanted to make sure that all of you out there, the rest of our audience, folks who couldn't make that live Q&A, got to hear answers to some of the excellent questions that were asked. I am joined today by Escape Collective CEO, Wade Wallace. Hi, Wade.
Hey, guys. Good to be here.
And our head of membership, Andy Van Bergen.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me along.
I just want to start by saying this is the first time I've ever been on Placeholders, and I'm quite strangely nervous because I have a podcast of my own, and all of a sudden I feel like a deer in the headlights.
Now, you know how Kit and Johnny feel. Yeah,
it's kind of like when I write a newsletter, I don't even proofread it, and it goes out to thousands of people. And when I write an actual article, I overread it to death. It's a strange thing. So that's my current state. But I think we had a pretty big milestone with our transparency report and reporting after 12 months in pretty radically candid detail how we run. And we're not doing anything revolutionary. There's other people out there or other businesses out there that do that, but it's pretty terrifying letting not only our members and our audience know how we operate, but we've kind of opened this up to the world and competitors. It feels like we've maybe given the recipe to how we work. But if there's also one thing I've learned in my career, it's that ideas are one thing and execution is another. So what we're doing isn't a big secret. And if you pay attention close enough, you can see what we're doing, but it kind of feels like we've laid it all out there, and it's maybe makes me feel a bit vulnerable. I don't know. How do you guys feel?
It's always a lot to kind of put yourself out there, I think. And particularly, it's in the name, right? It's a transparency report. That's what it's all about. But it's one of those things, like, I think we put it out there with the idea that we get back in return as well. And that's been the really interesting thing, from the first transparency report we put out, and as well as this one as well, where, you kind of explain with open books, like where we're at. And then it's really interesting to hear people's feedback around that and suggestions on course directions or refinements. There's always some really great things that come out of that.
Caley, was it transparent enough in your eyes, or could we have gone further?
Well, we've had some internal debate about that. I think I think it was transparent enough. This one was more transparent than the last one. I'm also, I don't know, like you said, it's a little bit scary putting all this stuff out there, right? And I think the one thing we didn't include was sort of like pretty detailed financial stuff, and there's a lot of reasons for that, I think. The biggest one is, like, we have competitors in this space. We don't necessarily need them to know absolutely everything about the ways that we operate. And we also want to make sure that we're sort of focusing on the right numbers, and it's easy to get kind of led astray by, just chasing the wrong vanity metrics, I think is the right term for it.
Yeah.
The big why behind this, why we do this, the transparency report, and why we've done now 2 of them, right, is that this business, this media company, operates differently than most other media companies out there. I think that that's worth just saying very plainly and clearly. And the reason for that is it's an entirely different business model that underpins the whole thing, right? So our core customer is you out there listening to this podcast. That's different from the way most media operates, right? Most media operates by essentially selling you to somebody else. That's the advertising model or the affiliate model or whatever. All those other things. It comes at media from a completely different sort of perspective. And because you out there are our core customer, speaking plainly and clearly and transparently with you is really, really important. And the transparency report is basically, it's not only is the report itself an opportunity to do that, but it is also a opportunity to sort of kickstart conversation around the things that matter, not only to us as a business and us as journalists and reporters and all the rest, also to you as the people that are consuming this content and reading this content and listening to this content and all the rest. So that's why we wanted to do the live Q&A. Again, we had some amazing, fantastic questions in there, really like make us think differently about the things that we do every single day. And we have a pile of questions in from elsewhere on Discord, on, Twitter and X, the comment section on the actual transparency report itself. And we'll try to touch on some of the sort of major themes that were found in a lot of those sorts of questions and comments in the various places where people could get in touch with us to try to answer the biggest questions that came out of this particular project.
If I'm also maybe a little bit not selfish, but I don't know what to call it, but if there's one thing that the transparency report does for me is it keeps me, I feel, pretty damn honest, right? And when we go and put something out there to the world, it's got to align to what we've told our staff, right? It's all above board. And I think that's a really good thing. And as well, too, it makes us think pretty damn hard about when we're going to do something. Like, we're going to have to tell the world about this, right? And we don't just release a product, classifieds or Bike Grid or whatever it might be, quietly and not tell anyone the reason behind that or our intent behind that. It makes us think it through really, really carefully because we're going to have to talk about it. I think that's one thing that the transparency report and keeping this regular throughout the years is going to help us with, for me anyway. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I was just going to say, I do really feel that, through this transparency report, it is like I was saying before, it's not a one-way street. It really is inviting conversation from our members. And, we're in a fortunate position where our members do impact the direction of our business, whether it's on a micro level or on a much bigger level, just through kind of the direction, advice and suggestions that they give us either informally or formally along the way.
Should we get to the questions? I think that's probably what people are here for anyway. Huh?
Yeah. Let's go to first question from, I don't know if it's Yensi or Gensi, but his or her question came on Discord, and you can hear it here.
Hey there, my name is Andreas Seher, and here's my question. You've mentioned in the future ads could be a possibility. How would you ensure EC stays independent if you grow your business with ads? For every ad partner, do you ask yourselves, can we sustain the business without this? Thanks. Bye.
That's a good question that we have got countless times. And I think no matter how many times we're asked that and that we're challenged on that, I think it's something that we always are mindful of. Do you want to speak to that, Kaylee, first off?
Yeah, I think that fundamentally the ad question, for me, it's a huge question, right? It's a massive question. And part of the reason is because we've kind of done that to ourselves, right? We put this stake in the sand, or we say we're going to launch largely without ads. And then we did another stake in the sand about a month ago saying that we're going to try to do 2024 without ads. And I think people really appreciate that. I think they'd like an ad-free experience. I think that there's no getting around that, right? Like if I'm on the internet and I have the option of not having to deal with any advertising at all as a consumer, I want that. I like that user experience. And I think that for us, as we sort of navigate this question, which is a big question that, on one side gets to maybe the sort of future health of the business, and on the other side gets to sort of our philosophical beliefs around, what the best way to consume content is. I think as we work through this question, for me, it's all down to execution and specifically what those ads would look like and whether they would be intrusive and whether they would be annoying and whether they would be in the wrong places and from the wrong companies and on all the rest. I personally I'm not that concerned about independence because I have the good fortune of working very closely with like our tech team, the people doing the reviews and things, and I just know how they operate, and I know that that's not a problem. Now, that's easy for me to say. If you're a listener or a reader out there, you don't hang out with Dave Rome all that often. So, we do need to sort of build in some structures. I think as if/when we ever went to some advertising, we would need to build in some structures to ensure that independence is retained and that there's never any reason to question that from our editorial. That said, yeah, Andy.
I was just going to say, I've just made a very large but boring household purchase, which required me to do a fair amount of internet research in a field that I'm not familiar with. And can I just say, I'm so stoked that we don't have all the affiliate ads and everything on our side.
The thing is that ads conjure up, the word ads conjure up all these horrific experiences with, not horrific, but these real poor experiences with you not even be able to read the content, and also being tricked into an ad is the content. And the advertisers don't even want that, right? They want to be authentic and have street cred and to be not intrusive. I think that's pretty universal with any marketing manager. However, when you do it right, it can be done really, really well. When they help us create content or bring our members something that we otherwise couldn't, I see no problem with that, because it's not like we're trying to sell you a checking account or something like that, right? This is very well aligned to our interests. This is what's I don't know, a deal on a new bike or bringing us content that we couldn't afford to do otherwise. Kaylee, you've been on the other side of this, I guess many times as the editor, pushing back on these types of things, but what types of things have you accepted in the past and say, yeah, that actually adds value to our members or our audience?
I mean, sort of the specific sort of like collaborations with brands to create content that we couldn't otherwise create. That has definitely happened in the past. And I think that's the sort of thing we would probably seek out in the future, probably first and foremost. Again, I come back to the execution of the ads, and I think that what the listeners are getting right now is a little bit of how the sausage is made when we have these discussions internally, because we all do have slightly different perspectives on this. And I think that for me, again, because as you say, Wade, that when you say the word online ad or digital ad, the immediate thought is pop-ups and autoplay video and like all these user experience atrocities that just like smash you in the face as you're just trying to read something. Like all you want to do is read something. And I am very proud of our reading experience now, right? I'm very proud of what we've built on that front and what our model allows us to do and build this incredibly clean website that is enjoyable to read, that you never run into things that you don't want to run into. That's incredibly valuable. And I think that as we sort of figure out this question, things like that, I think are sort of, that's immutable, right? Like we will never stick pop-up flashy ads in front of your eyeballs unless it's just like the absolute last, we have to stay alive kind of thing, right? Like that's the only way that I can see us ever doing that. But the thing is, there are a million different other kinds of ads that are a lot less intrusive and would help us build a stronger editorial product, because it would be additional revenue that we would be able to hire additional staff and hire additional reporters and journalists. And if you want to ask the question, what do you as the listener or reader get out of advertising? That's what you get. You get better content, right? Because I get more money, which means I can pay more people, which means you get better content. And that, I think, would be the end goal if we did decide to go down that route, is to make sure that additional revenue turns straight into an improved reading or listening experience versus a harmed one. And that's the strength that our member model basically allows us to do that, because that revenue underpins everything else that we do. And ads would just be sort of like, it'd be the cherry on the top of the cake sort of thing, as opposed to the whole cake.
Yeah, and that's just a good segue to the other part of Yensi's question. How do we ensure Escape Collective stays independent? And there's a definition of independence that might need maybe some interpretation or clarification on how we see that. But to answer that part of the question first, it's around like, who's the majority of our customer? Is it our members or is it the advertisers? And as long as we keep that being the majority of the members, we work for the members, and ads are just incremental on top of what we do. To answer the part about how do we define independence, independence isn't that we want to be unfiltered and piss everybody off and shout from the rooftops. That's not what that means. We have never been told to make this product review good, and us not being so-called independent requires us to do that. That's never happened in my entire career. What this refers to is more along the lines of our entire business being around what the advertiser wants, not what the audience or members want, and them directing us into a way and pushing us into content that we don't necessarily think is the best for the audience, but it's best for who's paying us, right? So, yeah,
I put affiliate in the same category, right?
I've seen people do affiliate really well. Like, do you see Rainmaker?
Exactly.
It does it really well.
Yeah.
But it's also done incredibly poorly as well. And I haven't seen anything much in between.
Yeah, that's. I think that when you said that, what we don't want is sort of like these additional revenue streams to pull us in a direction that we weren't already going. That's what I see affiliate do all over the place, right?
Yeah.
Like Ray at DC Rainmaker is very good at not allowing that to happen. But like if I type in best vacuum cleaner, I end up on Forbes. Right? What does Forbes know about vacuum cleaners? Forbes doesn't know a damn thing about vacuum cleaners. And they certainly would not be writing that content if they weren't getting, 50 cents per sold vacuum, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of thing that when you let the tail wag the dog, they're just that's a big media entity conglomerate trying to stay alive, right?
Yep.
But we have the ability to sort of shape our own destiny here and make sure that, yeah, we want to diversify the business. We want to continue to make content that you love. We want to not disappear, right? We also want to grow. We want to make more of the content that you all out there want to consume. To do that, we need to make sure we have a strong business. To do that, diversifying probably makes sense. We're not going to sit here and say absolutely no ads ever. I think that would be foolish. We're also not going to sit here and say, there's going to be ads on your website tomorrow. Like this is something we're going to do very carefully. And we're going to consider all the options, and we're going to make sure that the end result is a positive for the member, because you are our boss, basically. You are our customer, and that's the difference.
The other thing about ads, the last thing to add is that it takes a team of people to sell and maintain these ads. And I don't think that can be understated. We will never just accept one ad because someone just offered us a little bit of money to do so. Like we physically can't, right? Who does it? It's nobody's job to do that. So when we do approach this space, we're going to have to probably hire some salespeople, some account people, some operations people, not maybe that is all in one at the beginning, right? But it comes with a pretty big structure that we're very familiar with. And if I'm honest, the tailwinds are not in advertising. Like you look at where the tailwinds are with our business, and why on earth would we do ads in this market? It's just a bad business. So we have to approach this very, very carefully. And maybe that tide will change one day, but at the moment, where we're focusing on is something we're completely comfortable with, I would say.
I was listening to a media podcast recently, and they were talking about audience first media like it was a new idea. And I felt like that was probably part of the problem with the internet for the last about decade or so. It's the fact that came across as like an original idea. Maybe the things we write, we should write them for the people reading. What an original idea. What if we did that? So this is the thing. This is what people are coming from the rest of the internet, right? Is like that's why the bar is simultaneously so low, but also the expectations are so low, where everyone just kind of assumes that all the experiences are going to be terrible and everything's going to be bought and sold, and it's everything's pay for play, and it's just what we're used to. And so like half of our challenge is just convincing people otherwise, and that's why not having any ads on the site right now is a boon to that narrative and probably good for us. And the question in my mind is when that tipping point occurs, when the value of the ads overwhelms the value of the ad-free or current ad-free existence. If we're just looking at it kind of, I guess, quite objectively.
Question for you, Kaylee. You've come from a couple of businesses now where it's been advertising-led revenue, and there's other things to kind of underpin that revenue, but primarily advertising-led. How are things different editorially working for a company now, or working for a collective that, that is not dependent on eyeballs when you're crafting editorial? It's about crafting editorial for members.
Some major differences. We just don't chase page views quite like we used to, right? And I think that, for those who don't sort of live and work in media and think about this stuff all the time, just to kind of break it down quite simply is, we don't monetize, I call them flybys, right? Like, we don't monetize the traffic that shows up from Facebook, just the random people that are like on Facebook and click a link and show up and they end up on Escape Collective and they read one story ever and we never see them again, right? In an ad model, you do monetize those people. You monetize that eyeball, even if they only show up once. And Facebook used to send tons and tons and tons of that traffic. So it's a decent little business for a while. We only monetize people that stick around. And so that really changes the way that you think about your editorial, and it changes the way that you build your editorial products. And, anybody who's sort of like, if you dissect what we do a lot of stuff that's kind of recurring, right? We do a lot of newsletters, we do a lot of podcasts, we do a lot of stuff that, like, even if it's not exactly sort of the same format every single time, our authors, we're very sort of author forward. So you could see that as recurring, right? Like, I know that I love Ian's stories. I know that I love Dave's stories. I know that I love Dane's stories. And you see that author and you jump into that story every single time because you know that it's something that you're going to like. And the headline is less important, and the sort of broader distribution is less important to that retention of that member. On the other side of the coin is discovery and distribution and getting stuff out in front of as many people as we possibly can. And that's, at the moment, our real struggle. And part of it is because we're tuned for the other side. We're tuned for keeping members highly engaged and keeping this group of people that loves our stuff, loving our stuff, so they stick around. And that kind of exists in a bit of conflict with, like, algorithmic spread, for example. So we're quite reliant on organic sharing. We're quite reliant on, like sort of the group chat fodder, I call it, like stuff that just gets shared around in your groups or gets turned into a meme. Like, I love the meme lords on Instagram. They seem to like us. They use our website to make memes all the time. Screenshot our stuff and like change the headline. I love that. Like, that's actually advertising for us. So, like, great. But yeah, that sort of thing. We have to think about our editorial in these different ways, and different pieces of editorial sort of serve different functions. But fundamentally, the big difference is the flybys have no value. You need to turn them into somebody who comes back, and then they're valuable to the business.
That's a great segue to Shane Miller's question.
My name is Shane Miller, aka GP Llama, and here's my, well, not a question, just an observation for comment. With 7 podcasts and still no video, it seems like a huge imbalance to me. With that many pods, you're competing with yourselves for ears and available listening time. In my opinion, there is still a big hole with no video production. Look, I respect the costs and overheads of producing video, but it can be done on a budget. Even if not directly profitable, I do believe the reach it provides cannot be ignored.
Kaylee, you want to take that one?
Oh, yeah.
We talk a lot about this, don't we?
We talk a lot about video. Video's just video's hard. So that question was from
expensive.
From Shane. And expensive. So the question is from Shane, GP Llamas, which anybody who's like watches bike stuff on YouTube probably knows who that is, right?
Shane, lifetime member. Thank you, Shane.
Yeah,
good question.
He's friend of the podcast, as we like to say. Yeah, so like he's cracked it, right? He does an incredible job at video. We are not we're not really set up to do video in like the way that he does it. It's a different way of operating than the way we operate, right? Like, we have a staff that, we produce sort of somewhere between 3 and 7 stories a day. They're mostly written. Like, it's a bit living in the past, to be perfectly honest. Like, it's not a model that is looking to like how is Gen Z and below them consuming content, and I'm very well aware of that, right? At the same time, I do think that there will always be a group of people out there who wants to read things, but we need to figure this out, and we certainly have the talent on staff to do it, right? It's primarily like a technical problem and a resource problem, because we can't just sort of pull our own time out of thin air. We also can't pull cash out of thin air, and making these things happen costs both. And so I think the first thing for us is to start to take a lot of our quite popular podcast products and turn them into video products. And I actually just had a conversation this morning with Will over at Redbricks Media, who does our podcast edits, and we're sort of figuring out what the logistics of that might look like. And it's like surprisingly silly things that hold you back from doing that, but it is very much on our radar, is very much an opportunity for us. What I want to be careful of is not chasing that opportunity at the detriment of sort of what keeps the thing humming right now, which is, back to the previous question, making sure that we're producing content every single day that people want to come back and read and enjoy. Because for me, the video side of things is primarily a reach question.
I was going to say to what end? To what end? And that's the biggest question. What do we use video for? Because unless you have distribution, which is YouTube and Instagram or TikTok or whatever social media, you can't monetize that, to put it mildly. There's no way. The only way you can use that is to get people to discover you, and then how do you bring them over into our world? And that's the main question before we start spending all this money and time on it.
Yeah, it's a multi-step process there. But like here's an example, right? This is just a personal opinion. I hate algorithmic feeds, right? Like they just drive me nuts. I also think they're addictive. Like I open up Instagram Reels or TikTok, and 25 minutes go by and I wonder what I'm doing with my life, and I personally just despise it because I know what it does to me and I know what it does to people, right? But also incredibly effective. So, for example, Ronan and I made sort of a little like test reel recently. We're talking about time trial tech like you would with Ronan. And that reel has been viewed over 100,000 times, right? Now, that is many times our current membership. Many times our current membership. But can I actually tie that back to any sort of positive outcome? Like maybe there are some people that now know Ronan exists that didn't know Ronan existed previously. But that's pretty much the only thing. And it would take a pretty significant investment in Ronan's time to do enough of those things to build an audience, to then try to pull that audience back to the places where we can actually get them to sign up and be members, because feeding them free Instagram Reels is not going to do it, right? Like why would there's no method of getting anybody to sign up at that point.
There's a misconception that you're like, we're on video right now looking at each other, and there's a misconception that you just throw that online and job done. And it's to do that well and effectively it takes a large amount more effort and money. It takes money to edit these things. And that said, it's not impossible. We just got to figure out if it is effective and what it's doing for us, and that it is a good investment in our time and money. Because we do need more people to know about us, right? Like that's the outcome, but it's just a matter of people knowing about us doesn't pay our bills.
Yeah. The rough strategy I have sort of sketched out in my head, and this is not original, this is how a lot of folks do this. Like if you scroll Instagram Reels or TikTok for any period of time, you'll probably come across essentially clips from podcasts, right? And the purpose of those is to get you to go then listen to the podcast. And then once we have you at the podcast, that's when we have a much sort of closer relationship with that person. And that closer relationship is what is required for us to, bring them into the community and hopefully get them to sign up. Right. So that's kind of the rough kind of onboarding that I have in my head. And I think that's probably like the first thing that people will see is, like I said, sort of video versions of podcasts, whether that's just video of the podcast themselves or whether we sort of do kind of purpose-built clips like Ronan and I have been doing. Just to try to get people to know the other products that we have. And I think that answers Shane's question. I like the idea of doing video. It's just it's a massive pain in the butt, man. I'm just like,
I have enough experience at video to know that YouTube never liked us back in the previous business. We did a fairly average job. We did some amazing things, like Andy, when you went to Everest or rode the Silk Road, those are mind-blowing. But still, they got 20,000 views. That's nothing in the YouTube world. And it also translates to pennies if we're just, looking at the views and the advertising revenue that gives you. So yeah, to what end? And also, it's on our mind, right? It's not like we're dismissing that at all. It's front of mind.
I guess the other quick thought on that is I think there's this question of scale, which is that I feel like YouTube at the moment is kind of designed for sort of quite small entities. You could make it work. In the same way that like Substack is, for example. Like I think Substack as a solo, like if you're a reasonably well-known journalist or something, you could probably turn a Substack into a decent living relatively quickly and easily. Likewise, I feel like if I was going to, maybe I'm not the best example. If let's say Ronan. We've been talking about Ronan and his tech stuff, right? If Ronan was going to go off and try to create his own YouTube channel, he could probably do okay, right? Like there'd be sort of enough ad revenue behind that to sort of make it kind of work. But, we're a larger organization. We're kind of in that sort of weird middle ground in between like the big boys and the solo creators. And it's kind of, we're just kind of like the wrong scale for it. It feels like a little bit where like the numbers don't have a meaningful impact on, we're a 7-figure business, right? Like if we're just sort of, this is transparency. We can talk transparently. We're a 7-figure business. And so like,
that's your salary, Kaylee.
Yeah, that's just me.
7-figure salary.
No, but like, okay, so like if I'm just going solo on YouTube and I make $50,000 off of YouTube ads in a year, I am stoked, right? Like it's probably not even my full-time job. I can do some other stuff on top of it. Like that sounds great. And that's actually a lot of money for a solo YouTube creator. $50,000 in the grand scheme of what we do, with the amount of time and attention it would take to get that much cash out of YouTube, is probably not worth it. So we have to kind of look at it objectively and just view it as marketing, basically. What can we do to increase our distribution and discovery? That was a long answer.
Yeah.
Sorry, everybody.
But it shows how much we do think about it. Next question from Bernie.
Hi, my name is Bernie, and this is my question. Since starting, what's gone as expected and what's been a surprise? Is this the 1-year transparency report you imagined you'd be writing when it all started?
Andy, that's a really good question. We've been doing all the talking. What's been a surprise to you since you came on board?
Yeah, since I came on board, I think the surprises have been in kind of these unexpected areas. We know there's a lot of predictability around what we're doing. We kind of understand our model. We've got a really good understanding of our membership and our readership, but the surprises have come in kind of some little areas. So like the ones that stick out for me is, we've launched a lifetime membership program, or we've got a lifetime membership program, and the amount of people that have signed up to that was well in advance of anything that we ever expected. And, it's not a cheap membership, right? And these are people they're saying that I want to support this in the biggest, beefiest way possible, which is really, really exciting.
We've got hundreds of lifetime members. It's $1,000 US, 1,500 Australian. How many pounds and euros is that? It's expensive, right?
Just before this podcast, we signed up another lifetime member, which is absolutely fantastic. That's
so
been with
humbling.
us. Yeah, it's really humbling. And I think,
was it my dad again?
Just the feeling of support from the community has been really incredible. So, it's one thing to support with your wallet, but it's another to genuinely go out of your way to try and make sure that we're succeeding in every way possible. And takes different forms. It's either in assisting with recommendations around things that we could improve, or suggestions or ways that we could potentially adapt and tweak what we're doing to kind of get the best for our members and get the best for ourselves as well.
I was just going to say, isn't it amazing how other publications have to give away a bike just to get you to participate in a survey? Meanwhile, we'll get 80% of our members telling us their honest feedback. Well, unsolicited, never mind sending them a survey. It's amazing, and it helps us guide our decisions and do what's valuable for our members, because it's their money that's paid for this, right? Why would we do something against that? Like, they're our customer. It's really, really simple and clear cut. And I don't know, that's one thing I'm pretty proud of.
Yeah, I think the feeling of meaning that we're giving to people is, again, it's like, I wouldn't say it's a surprise, but it's really heartwarming to kind of read that. And if I can just read out an example of one of the many comments that I saw on the transparency report that we put out. So this is from Dan Mays, and Dan says, "Rarely have I spent $100 a year on something that gives me such great joy. I feel a real connection with your staff and contributors, and I truly appreciate the long-term focus you have made establishing EC."
Yeah, wow.
I love that. I love that. I'm surprised by how many podcasts we have.
We do have a lot.
We have a lot of podcasts. There's a reason for that, right? So to back up a little bit, we I guess, was this August of last year when Jared was running surveys, and we came to a realization, which in hindsight should have been very obvious based on sort of the origin story of us, and the fact that the first thing Dave Rowe and I did when we got laid off previously was make a podcast 2 days later, right? Like, in hindsight, we should have guessed this, but it's an absurd percentage of our membership are regular podcast listeners, and we really identified that as a medium that our membership in particular really, really enjoys. And I think we're at the moment struggling a little bit with sort of, okay, we've got a lot of this stuff now. How do we spread it all out? How do we keep it organized? How do we make sure that people can get what they want when they want it? That's tricky when you've got as many shows as we have. But yeah, I would not have guessed that essentially audio would have been such an important tool for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've always considered myself a writer. I have been a writer forever. I've been, all the way back to like the very beginning of my career. I'm a journalist and a reporter in written word. And, if I take sort of like my role as sort of head of editorial, if I just look at the content that I make these days, just that, there's no question that hosting placeholders is significantly more important to this business than anything I write. There's no question in my mind whatsoever.
You're a pretty good writer too, Kelly. You're a pretty good writer.
Well, thank you, but it's also not as effective, which is weird for me to say. And like, it's the relationships built between the people that make a podcast and the people that listen to a podcast. And I say this from both sides, right? Like, as somebody who makes a podcast and also somebody who listens to a fair number of them and like enjoys, I call it the ear friends effect, right? Like, I feel like I know these people that make podcasts that have no idea I exist, in the same way that I'm sure that there are folks out there who listen to me every single week. And I'm sure we're best friends, but also I don't know you exist. So like, it's this sort of strange, but very kind of intimate medium that turns out very, very effective at building a community that wants to sign up and support content that they like. So it's this nice little cyclical effect, and I just we didn't understand the power of that when we launched. We only discovered that 4 or 5 months into our existence.
Can I share an anecdote with our listeners and members on this topic? And it sort of leads on from what you just said, Andy. A good friend of mine, also a member, his name is Justin Colston. Shout out to him. He used to be a radio host. I can't remember exactly. I don't know exactly what. I didn't grow up in Australia and wasn't familiar with the radio scene, but he was very prominent apparently in that scene. And he, as a member, was very honest with me and said, look, you guys' podcasts, they need some work, right? If this is something you guys are going to be focusing on, like, he gave me some very honest feedback. And I shared that feedback with Kaylee, and that was hard to hear.
Cried a little bit.
Yeah,
just a couple tears.
It's hard
couple small
it's
tears.
hard to hear, but it's also the most useful thing that we could possibly ask for. It's all great getting pats on the back from, the message you read out, Andy, but it's really difficult to hear the tough stuff. And he put us in touch with his former executive producer, a gentleman named Craig Bruce, who was a legend in morning radio, legend executive producer in radio in Australia. And Craig, as a favor, came on and is helping us out with our podcasts. And I notice such a difference from 1 year ago now in how placeholders, Geek Warning, all of our podcasts are. They're just such a better, more organized, tighter listen. And again, that's just an example of what a member has brought for us, right? And then also what Craig has helped us do. Craig will be listening to this as well, and Craig was the one who suggested, guys, what's the audio podcast version of your transparency report? I'm like, oh, I didn't think of that, right? That's why we're doing this, right? Like, yeah, let's bring our people into our world, and if this is going to be transparent, well, this is as good as it comes, I suppose, right? And that type of honesty we absolutely encourage and makes us better.
Yeah, and I think that, again, that's just sort of acknowledging what we're good and what we're not good at and what we need to learn. And I think that our members appreciate that sort of honesty and honesty with ourselves. It's like I said, like I'm a written journalist. That's the training I have. I've never been on the radio. I've never done anything in audio. I started a podcast. I basically started doing a podcast because Fred Dreyer at VeloNews was like, we got to make a podcast. I was like, okay, what does that mean? Buy some microphones. And actually, no, it was before Fred. It was my old friend Trevor Connor and the Fast Talk podcast, which I'm sure some listeners out there will also be familiar with. And we just like figured it out. We just went on Amazon and bought some really not good enough mics and, and sorted it out. And then I made a podcast for 5 years before Craig showed up and told me all the things I was doing wrong. And turns out somebody who's an actual expert in their area knows how to make a better podcast. And I think that, us leaning on our membership and the expertise of others and this like acknowledgement that we don't do everything perfectly is a big part of the culture here at Escape Collective, and making sure that we're always trying to do just better and better and better and better. And, 2% here, 2% there, the marginal gains of cycling media, really.
I said once, I remember, I look back at the stuff I wrote at the beginning of Cycling Tips and, oh my God, is it embarrassing? And to this person's point, well, if you weren't embarrassed about it, that means you haven't gotten better, right? So again, we look how far we've come in the quality and structure of our podcasts in, what has it been? It's been 8 months, 6 months or something like that, right? That's a short amount of time. So always mess it up when nobody's listening, when nobody's watching, right? That's just the lesson I've learned from that. And if you're not embarrassed about what you've previously done, well, that means you haven't gotten better. So yeah.
I just try to forget that whenever we make a podcast, we're doing it for like a full football stadium.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just don't think about that. Just don't think about that. You'll clam up and say absolutely nothing.
Geez, I'm glad you didn't say that at the beginning of this, Kaylee.
It's cool. Yeah, only a stadium. Just you down in the middle, you and Taylor Swift hanging out. Tens of thousands of your closest friends.
Hey, let's go to the last question.
Hi, my name is Brad Tipp. I'm from Seattle. Here's my question. As a community, what can we do that we're not doing to get this to a sustainable outcome? I.e., how can we help in ways that might not be obvious to us, but maybe to you?
Andy, you're head of membership. What's your answer to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of sort of more obvious ways that people can help. And, at the moment with Escape Collective, we want to reach as many new potential members and readers as possible. So I guess the easiest and simplest way is by helping other people, helping your friends in your writing groups, helping people in your clubs, helping your other writing buddies just kind of know about us. That's through maybe sharing some of your favorite content that you're reading, or, if you love one of our newsletters, by forwarding it on to a couple of friends as well. But there's also some other ways. And, we've got some really fantastic games that are on the site at the moment. We've got Bike Grid, which is a lot of fun if you're not playing it daily. For myself, it's excruciatingly hard. If I can even get 9 correct answers, I'm really happy. But I've got a little WhatsApp group with some of my writing friends, and we enjoy kind of roasting each other about some of the results there. There's a fantasy game. Obviously, it's in the middle of the Giro d'Italia now. It'll be up and running for the Tour de France and Tour de Femmes. a lot of fun. That is a lot of fun. And again, speaking of roasting, just shout out to one of our members, Richard, who I have a battle with every year, all the time, and has already started roasting me about the Tour de France, even though it's like still months away. But these are things that you can kind of share with your friends and bring them into Escape and sort of expose them to a little bit of what we're about. That's probably the biggest, immediate, simple way that members can assist.
Yeah, we've done things very intentionally with regards to fantasy or bike grid or classifieds, where we realize everybody isn't a news and tech junkie like many of us are, but we can do things that are potentially applicable to them. Fantasy, I love fantasy. I love my little WhatsApp group, and I invite my friends. Many of them aren't members, right? But we all play. And then it becomes, well, they come to the website to check the results or the race preview to see who to pick next. And that becomes useful to them, and maybe we can bring them into more of what we do. But even not, I mean, I love being able to connect people in a way that, and give them a skin in the game of a race that they otherwise wouldn't. And fantasy is one of those things. Bike grid is a great thing to play with your friends on WhatsApp and expose them to what we do. Classifieds is a way of us, being relevant to almost every cyclist out there. You've got gear, you want to buy and sell your gear. That's a great place to do it. Tell your friends about that. You're our most powerful advocates, our members. And, and us arming you with ways of telling your friends to bring them into more of what we do is absolutely something we would appreciate, and probably got to think more about how to arm you better with things to do that with.
Yeah, it's definitely an area that we're working on at the moment, being able to arm you with those tools for sure.
You could go click on merch at the top of the homepage, buy a pack of stickers and stick them on every single light pole in your town. You could rent a blimp.
I do that to a friend of mine, his bike. Whenever he rocks up to his bike, I have a whole bunch of escape stickers, and he spends an hour with a scraper and oil getting them off.
Do you guys have, you guys live near the beach? Do you have those like planes that drive with the big banners behind them?
They do smoke shows here even.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could rent one. You could rent one of those that just says "Check out Escape Collective."
We want something original. Like if I had $1 for every single plane I've seen towing an Escape Collective banner.
Just giving people some ideas. No, share stuff. Yeah, it's huge for us, right? Like, yeah, flybys, people that show up from Google or Facebook. They're. It's not that they're not valuable. It's that they're at the very beginning of a journey that maybe they'll sign up at some point, versus, your riding buddies who, you can convince in person to check us out. That's just if you're talking sort of like very objectively, like that's better lead, right? Like that's a much better lead for us than just some random person who happens to Google something that Dave or Ronan wrote, right?
Yeah.
Well, and a bucket of paint and a roller on Alpe d'Huez next month with a big EC. But, just those two things.
No Alpe d'Huez in the men's race. Women's race, though. Head out there in August.
What did you think I was talking about?
Yeah. What a finish that'll be, eh? I think those are some good questions. There were many others that maybe we didn't have as, insightful answers to, but I think these are the ones that maybe most effectively tackle the biggest subjects that came up. So thank you, everyone, for asking your questions, being a part of this journey, and caring so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we'll see you at another podcast in about 12 hours.